Leaders have multiple sources of power. Within those multiple sources of power, there's something called personal power. And it comes from something called referent power. And referent power is the kind of power that you get when you show up as somebody that other people say, wow, I'd like to be more like that.
On this episode of Executive Edge, Simon is joined by Carole Robin, a former Stanford GSB lecturer and co-founder of Leaders in Tech.
It turns out that people are more likely to follow you and be influenced by you if they feel more connected to you.
Carole explores the human side of leadership, how leaders can develop referent power, create meaningful connections, foster trust in teams, and how interpersonal dynamics shape both professional and personal success.
In the end, Simon, people do business with people.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition in our series, platform Executive Edge, brought to you and powered by Tenzing. Excited to have with me Carole Robin. Thank you for coming on, Carole. Really appreciate your time.
Happy to be here. Delighted to be here.
As normal, we go into a quick intro on our guests, so I'll do that and then we'll jump right in. So everyone, Carole Robin is a highly respected educator, author, and leadership expert. Spent many years at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, acronym of GSB for short, where she taught the legendary course Interpersonal Dynamics. It's affectionately called by students and the masses as the Touchy-Feely class, which I love. While at Stanford, Carole served as the Dorothy J. King Lecturer in Leadership and directed the Arbuckle Leadership Fellows Program. Her teaching earned her the MBA Distinguished Teaching Award and the Robert K. Jedicke Silver Apple from Stanford, which is fantastic. After her formal academic role, Carole co-founded a non-profit organization, Leaders in Tech, and if I'm correct, you're still running that. Is that
absolutely?
Okay,
and going strong.
Excellent. And that brings the interpersonal dynamics principles that Carole taught at Stanford into the real world, startup founders and executives in Silicon Valley, which is fantastic. Carole's also the co-author, of the book Connect, Building Exceptional Relationships with Family, Friends, and Colleagues, which gives anyone access to the lessons from her decades in teaching. So highly recommend grabbing yourself a copy of that book. Fantastic, Carole. Just appreciate you being on. So for those who haven't read your book, or those who have but now get to hear from the author themselves, what are some of the key teachings that you impart on leaders that you're coaching and mentoring currently from that Touchy-Feely class at Stanford that you feel really resonate with them?
Maybe I'll start with kind of a meta way of thinking about this, which is that one of the things that my co-author and I realized when we started to try to codify everything we had taught for decades is that relationships exist on a continuum. Mm-hmm. And at one end of the continuum, there's contact and no connection. Those are your thousands of Facebook friends. Also at that end is dysfunction. Mm-hmm. At the other end of the continuum is what we came to call exceptional, which is what we saw created in this course among the students who were in small groups together in this course. But, we're not suggesting the goal should be to turn every single one of your relationships into exceptional. That's unnecessary. It's impractical. It's a lot of work. But it turns out that the skills and competencies that are required to move along this continuum from contact and no connection towards exceptional takes you to at least robust and also functional versus dysfunctional. So there are 6 key hallmarks of relationships that have moved to at least robust and functional. And the first 3 have to be with allowing ourselves to be more known, like being more real, actually, and trusting each other. And the second 3 have to do with being honest with each other and dealing with conflict productively and being invested in each other's growth. So that's what students learn. Now, how they learn it, if we double click on each of those, there's tons of lessons. But what happens over the course of the quarter is that these students who either know each other somewhat but not well, or have actually disliked each other from the very first day they arrived at the school, but ended up in the same group together, emerge from this course with what are really exceptional relationships. And in fact, at all alumni reunions, the class they most talk about, having served them, is Touchy-Feely. Emphasis on the feely, not the touchy. I'll get back to what that means. But they say that course was worth the entire price of tuition, and they say it over and over and over again.
Yeah, I love it. That's fantastic. So translating that into, you're an executive, right?
Yes.
Large organization, maybe even in a startup environment, both being willing and then able to have that level of deep connection isn't easy, right? I mean, it's
absolutely not.
And how does that come through with the students? Like, they've learned the content, they're in the class environment, they've seen it work, in that environment, in kind of a laboratory setting, in an education. Have they come back to you years later and given you insights into how they've made breakthroughs with their team?
Hundreds, if not thousands of them have come back over the years with statements like, I'm pretty sure I just became a CEO. I owe it all to you. I just raised my third round. I owe it all to you. I mean, we'd expect that as outcomes from the Graduate School of Business.
Yeah.
But I also get, pretty sure your class just saved my marriage. I just reconciled my relationship with my mother, who I hadn't talked to for years. Yeah. Thank you for finally writing a book, because my co-founder didn't go to Stanford, and now I'm actually able to bring him up to speed on everything I learned. I mean, I have many, many, many anecdotes like that. Because in the end, Simon, people do business with people. They don't do business with ideas or machines or products or money or strategies. They do business with people. That's why this course is so legendary at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, not hidden away in some psych department. So the fundamental premise that people do business with people, and that being interpersonally competent is a hallmark of both personal and professional success, it's a determinant, is lived over and over and over again in this course and in what they do after they've left. Now, the great joy for me in having started Leaders in Tech and bringing all this to executives who are already CEOs and founders, or executives, and most of them in pre-IPO companies, because that's our sweet spot. We decided to go after the pre-IPO founders and executives, since we can still impact the culture that they build in their companies.
Interesting. Okay.
And they say the same thing, which is, I mean, many of them say, I don't know where this has been all my life. Many of them say, why aren't we teaching this to kids? And it's really that we become socialized to show up a certain way. A lot of it, by the way, has to do with keeping parts of ourselves hidden, particularly how we're feeling. Thus, the emphasis on feelings in Touchy-Feely, because feelings is one of the key ways in which we connect with each other. So you might be angry about something or sad about something, and that might be something that would never make me sad or angry, but I know anger and I know sadness. So I can connect with you around the feeling, and that creates a sense of feeling heard and seen and not judged in ways that are unique. Furthermore, the way the students learn all this is, yes, there are some lectures. Yes, you go to class, but most of the learning happens in these small groups called T groups. T stands for training, not therapy. And in which they interact with each other with very little agenda. And what they learn is oh, the way I show up draws this person closer to me and distances this person from me. The way I show up influences this person, leads them to think they may be more likely to follow me. And this person emerges thinking, or at least starts out thinking, God bless you, but I'd never follow you. And that kind of real reactions to each other surfaces and gets talked about and then gets addressed over the course of the quarter. Now, the program at Leaders in Tech is like Touchy-Feely on steroids. And so we have these T groups are a central part of the program at Leaders in Tech too. It's a 4-day immersion, and in the case of our leadership and Leaders in Tech fellows, there's a monthly 2 months in a row on Zoom for a couple hours to talk about application. How are you using this? What challenges are you running into? And then 1 day long, a quarter, where the group comes together again. So let me pause there because I probably generated a bunch of follow-up questions from you.
Yeah, well, I think what's fascinating to me is the core principles of being a leader, or the assumptions of the core principles of being a leader. And these, a lot of the times, are assumptions that we build in our own brain versus actually
we develop mental models.
Yeah, a lot of them are evolutionary in my mind, right? They're connected to survival, right? Showing vulnerability would be deemed a weakness that out in the Neanderthal world would end to death, right?
Exactly.
Showing you're strong, leading the tribe, based on strength, or at least knowing where to go and how to get food and get over sickness, etc. Find ways to the water stream. All of those would generate credibility and kudos and allow you to retain control. So how do you break through with someone who's spent, say they're a startup founder or even an executive, right? They've spent the best part of 20, maybe 30, 40 years running on the assumption that hiding behind a mask that shows strength is directly correlated to their ability to be in control and to lead and lead effectively. You're telling them, throw that away, be vulnerable, right? Connect with people on a personal level, show them who you truly are, maybe even go through self-discovery to find out who you are before you start trying to connect with those individuals. Because if you don't know who you are and you're not authentic and you're just pretending to try to get to know them, then consciously they'll be able to recognize that. How do you break that fundamental assumption?
Well, let me back up for a moment and just say that there is a lot of research that shows that leaders have multiple sources of power. They have power based on the kind of vision they set and the kind of or structures they put in place. There are many sources of power. I'm not saying that interpersonal competence is the only thing that's going to make you successful. But within those multiple sources of power, there's something called personal power.
Mm-hmm.
And within personal power, and this is also research-based, comes from the rewards and punishments that you engage in based on people's behavior. Based on personal power also comes from where you are in the hierarchy. If you're at the top of the food chain, you have more power. It comes from expertise. How much do you know what you're talking about? And it comes from something called referent power. Mm-hmm. So, I'm not going to talk about the other four. Leaders need all of them. But the one that they are least likely to have developed is referent power. And referent power is the kind of power that you get when you show up as somebody that other people say, wow, I'd like to be more like that. That's when you're a role model, when you're a referent figure, that's why it's called referent power. And it turns out that the research shows that referent power and expertise are the only two which, when predominantly used, not to the exclusion of the others, but predominantly used, those leaders create the highest performing organizations.
Interesting.
People who predominantly use the hierarchy, there's no correlation to high performance. And people who predominantly use rewards and punishment create lower performing organizations. So for starters, that's how this work is situated within the context of leadership. The other thing that I used to ask my students, I now ask all our participants, a question to sit in is not, why do people follow them, and then study a bunch of other leaders and what they did. That's one way to learn about leadership. Perfectly good way to learn about leadership, not the way I taught about leadership. The question I ask people to sit is why should somebody follow you?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not Steve Jobs and you're not Sheryl Sandberg. And so why should somebody follow you? And it turns out that people are more likely to follow you and be influenced by you if they feel more connected to you.
Hmm.
So a lot of referent power comes from connection, which comes from authenticity and a willingness to be more real with each other. And we've all been socialized to spin our image. So one of the things that students learn in the T groups at the school, one of the things that participants learn in the T groups in the Leaders in Tech programs is, wow, it turns out that people are generally more drawn to the real me than the spun image me.
Mm-hmm.
People tend to be more influenced by the real me and by the way, people find me more courageous and stronger when I'm willing to be vulnerable, appropriately vulnerable. I'll come back to that. It's not, I'm just going to fall apart and tell you that I really shouldn't be in the role I'm in because, everybody made a mistake in giving me money. But, I'll give you a quick example. If I'm the VP of marketing and I stand up in front of the troops after we've lost share for 3 months in a row and I say, we are crushing it, I'm not very credible.
Mm-hmm.
If I stand up in front of everybody and say, well, no surprise, we've lost 3 months of 3 points of share. We've lost share over the last 3 months significantly. And I have no idea what we should do about it. I'm not sure I should be your VP of marketing. Well,
Mm-hmm.
then that's inappropriate authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
If I stand up in front of them all and say, okay, we've lost share. I wish I could stand here and tell you I know exactly what's going on and what we should do about it. I have a couple of ideas, but I've never needed you all more. Which of those 3 leaders would you rather follow? And it does take a certain amount of vulnerability to admit you don't have all the answers, to admit you've made a mistake, to admit that sometimes, you wish you had more to offer. That makes you real.
Mm-hmm. So there was one data point that I thought was quite interesting in your book, and something for people to not get overwhelmed by, right? Something that kind of potentially could guide them on how to improve.
Yes.
Was around a percentage, 15% specifically,
yes.
of increase in
yes.
disclosure. So unpack that for us a little bit, like why 15% versus 50, and then also what are ways that executives could maybe test that out to see if they see the results in
right.
with amongst their team, because testing in a real life environment
great question. So think about, we all have a comfort zone. The stuff we do, we don't think twice about. We all have what we might think about 3 concentric circles. The inner circle is your comfort zone. The outer circle is your danger zone. In a million years, you wouldn't say that. But there's this circle in the middle that's an important circle called the learning zone. You have to step outside your comfort zone to learn something new. But you have to stay inside your danger zone or you freak yourself and get another person out. But the students used to say, but Carole, the minute I step outside my comfort zone, how do I know I'm not in my danger zone? How do I know I'm just in my learning zone? So we came up with, try stepping a little bit outside your comfort zone. Think in terms of 15%.
Yeah. Okay.
Could have been 12, could have been 17, but just to kind of give people a sense of a little bit. So I might, say something that's a little bit outside my comfort zone, but it's not freaking me out or freaking you out in terms of a disclosure or in terms of a piece of feedback. I mean, the 15% rule applies to disclosure and becoming known. It also applies to being honest and giving people feedback. And so what happens is if I disclose a little bit, or I give you a little piece of feedback, and it goes well, the world does not end, then the comfort zone that you and I have with each other has grown by 15%. That circle is now 15% bigger. And now I can go 15% beyond that. And you can go 15% beyond that. And that's how we grow relationships, how we deepen relationships, a little bit at a time.
I love that. So do leaders generally, or do you advise that they do this maybe amongst peers, right? They kind of talk about approaches that they're taking to try and improve connection and, become stronger leaders. Or
what's more... do this? Are you talking about go through the program?
Yeah. So, in order to
learn, yes.
Yeah. Out in the real world.
In fact, it's important in a T group to have no power differentials.
Okay,
so you want to learn about this in an environment where everybody, where the field is level, a level playing field. Because power dynamics then distort and complicate things a lot. So you might as well first learn how to do it where there are no power dynamics, and then you can adjust based on power dynamics.
Yeah, this is fascinating. And I can see this as being, beneficial, but also something that people struggle with in every industry, right? I mean, I know the pre-IPO is where you focus, as
Absolutely.
Like you said, as the option to.
Over the years, my alums have gone into every industry, every size company you can imagine, all over the world. And the comments we get are universal from all of them.
Can you disclose any kind of like publicly open names that have touted the program and willing for you to share, or is it all strictly confidential?
I feel a little protective of my students. I could name people that you would recognize. I could name companies you would recognize. And I'll tell you, if anybody is interested in at least learning who's going through Leaders in Tech, that is, you go to leadersintech.org, and we have listed all the CEO founders that have been through our program in 10 cohorts.
Okay.
And many of them are unicorns now. We now have represented amongst our alums probably $60 billion worth of companies. So some people might recognize some of them.
Okay. All right. I'm going to do that right after this, and then I know they encourage others to as well. But the reason I bring it up was...
and hang on. There's one other thing you'll learn on the website. Okay. So we're a nonprofit.
Okay.
And also on the nonprofit, you're going to see a list of all the VCs, especially, who have given us money. And that's also public, which they wouldn't have given us if they didn't believe in what we do. People like Reid Hoffman, people like Jeremy Liu. So these are very famous VCs in the Valley.
Now, I think that's a huge mark of credibility, but also goes to, there is a lot of self-help, leadership, communication courses and books around the world. But I think what's fascinating about your work and the teachings is you've put it into, a real-time laboratory setting, right? That's been tested, out there in, with companies that are under an immense amount of pressure. I mean, raising for venture capital and having very tight growth, either revenue or just other metric related goals. There's a huge amount of pressure on people, and I think it also changes people and their understanding of themselves. So just a little inkling or kind of guideline of something that they can adjust in how they approach leadership and retention, and hiring and communicating with these various groups of stakeholders that helps put them on a better path to be successful is extremely valuable.
Absolutely.
Without a doubt. So is leaders in tech, is it international? Is it something you're expanding into other
So
countries as well?
so
Or?
we are Bay Area based, but what we have found we've just launched cohort 10, our 10th cohort. We started in 2017. Well, this is a cohort of fellows. So we have a fellows program, which is kind of our flagship. This is for CEO founders of pre-IPO companies. You have to have at least raised a substantial seed, but pre-IPO. And we just launched our latest cohort of 84 fellows. When we first started, I'll just take a short side trip. When we first started, my co-founder and I were talking about, I said to my co-founder, why would anybody come to Leaders in Tech?
Mm-hmm.
There's a million, programs out there for leadership development and learning. And in fact, there was one at Stanford Business School that I had helped develop. And why would they not go there? Mm-hmm. And, Joe said to me, Carole, we both know a number of VCs. We're going to send them an email and say, we're starting this thing. If you know a founder in this sweet spot, nominate them and we'll send them an application to apply to the program. In 2 weeks, we got 380 nominations. Mm-hmm. This was in 2017 and in the fall of 2017. And I looked at Joe and I said, I think that's what people call product market fit. And then of those, 180 applied and another 100 said, I can't do it this year. Can I apply next year?
Yeah.
So it was really clear that we had something right out of the gate. And, and I think that, some of that is that the course is extremely well known in the Valley, especially, and among tech as a result. But now we have people coming from all over the world to be fellows. We have people from the UK. We have people from Latin America. We have people from Asia. So it's still Bay Area based because it's still tech based, and that is still the heart of tech. And we toy with expanding, but we're a nonprofit. We have limited resources, and we still have an awful lot of people who want to do this that come to us.
I think what's fascinating is if I look at this is a slight broad assumption, but generally pre-IPO senior executives, especially ones that have gone through, the VC mill, generally tend to be slightly younger, right? So they can't look back on 3 decades of experience in various executive roles that get you to that level. And that doesn't necessarily mean that experience always leads you to the understanding that vulnerability and human connection is the reason you're being successful, because there's just as many people at that level, right, that are part of public companies or, large privately funded organizations that have 3 decades of experience that are still extremely closed off and have perhaps used some of those less efficient techniques you've talked about as part of their leadership repertoire that they believe has got them to that state. But
well, the fact is we have fellows that, yes, I'd say maybe they tend to be younger in their maybe the average age is late 30s, early 40s. But we have folks that are well into their 50s, and we have folks that are in their late 20s. What the key is people with growth mindsets. Leaders with growth mindsets of any age find this kind of learning very compelling. And you asked earlier, what would motivate a leader to even learn this stuff? Well, one of the things that we have all the fellows fill out is a self-assessment, and then give that assessment to multiple people and compare how they see themselves to how other people see them, and then ask themselves whether or not there are discrepancies there and what do they want to do about it. Well, a version of that assessment is on the book website, connectandrelate.com. You can download it for free. You can assess just how interpersonally competent are you. You can give it to the people that you're working with, living with, interacting with. You can compare how they see you to how you see you, and then decide whether or not there are some compelling reasons to go learn how to be more interpersonally kind.
And I assume there's kind of a side effect, right, which could be just as valuable, kind of a byproduct of even going through this process, and that's probably some level of fulfillment and maybe even happiness, right? Because we live in a world where everyone wears an invisible mask.
Yeah.
And prominent psychologists and psychoanalysts have been telling us the best part of 75, nearly 80 years, that understanding who you are and coming to terms with the self is part of your journey in life.
Yep. In
The
fact,
lowest
Simon,
stress.
exactly. In fact, one of the things we say to people in the course is it takes two to know one. I can't know myself nearly as well without you as if I only operate in a vacuum. I have absolutely no idea what the impact of my behavior is on you. But if I create conditions where you're willing to tell me what are the ways in which I show up that are more compelling to you and less compelling to you, I learn a lot about myself. I can think I'm a great listener, but only you know whether you feel heard by me.
Interesting. So that's the feedback element of this, right? The vulnerability isn't just a list of techniques and ways that you share and disclose more information in order to build credible connection. It's being honest with both yourself and the other people,
Exactly.
and creating an unbiased, almost platform for that two-way communication that allows you to be more real.
Exactly. And the other thought that came to mind as you were speaking is that the vast majority of our participants and students experience a kind of meaning in their interactions that profoundly changes their life. Now they find they experience more meaningful work, more meaningful relationships.
They're able to hug the inner child and accept their weaknesses and realize that coming to that realization and that awareness is what can actually help them go further in life. I think that's
exactly. It's also very exciting for them because they all come in with mental models, beliefs, and assumptions about how they need to show up in order to be successful, both in terms of how much they should disclose, how much they should or shouldn't give feedback. And when they test those assumptions, and get new data, they update their mental models. So I might have a mental model that, feedback weakens relationships and can even ruin them. And they emerge from these programs thinking feedback builds, knowing feedback builds relationships, creates even stronger, more robust relationships. They come in thinking disclosure, being vulnerable is going to make me look weak. They emerge thinking, oh, when I was vulnerable, people actually thought I was stronger. So they get new data with which to update their mental models about how to show up.
Yeah. I mean, we've all been programmed, as kids and going through high school and in our early 20s to believe the opposite, right? I'm sure everyone has stories, whether they remember them or have hidden them in the back of their mind.
Absolutely. I've often said if I had my career to do over again, I might start with little kids because they have natural instincts that actually serve them pretty well. And then we socialize those right out of them.
Interesting. Yep. What's next? Is there another book from the content, or are you purely looking at just expanding leaders in tech and changing more lives? Where is Carole's next decade or so?
Well, it's interesting you should ask me that, because frankly, I have been kind of struggling with that in the last year. I've had long COVID for over 3 years, which has seriously curtailed my lifestyle. It's better now, but I'm not out of the woods, so I have to be very judicious about how I use my energy and my capacity. I do really, really love to teach. So I'm doing a little more teaching at Leaders in Tech, probably next year, than I have been doing. I've been doing a little teaching all along, but I might do a little more teaching. I'm toying with a podcast, actually.
Love.
But that's a potential for 2026. I have thought about another book, and I'll just tell you that writing that book was the most difficult thing I've ever done in my entire professional life. And it was heart-wrenching to write a book about how people can connect with each other, especially across differences. At a time when, man, is there anything we could use more in the world right now than to learn how to connect across our differences? And to be so dismissed by the media was just crushing.
Yeah.
The lowest point in my career came when I was actually on a podcast, a very, very popular podcast with two podcasters who have very big following. And at one point when we finished the podcast, they said, so everybody on the planet should read this book. You know, why isn't everybody reading this book? No, they said everybody should. And I said, well, okay, then riddle me this. If it's so great, why do you think we're having so much trouble getting anybody in the major media to actually, let the world know it exists? And they said, oh, Carole, that's easy. If you'd written a book, 5 ways to get rid of the toxic people in your life, you'd have a runaway bestseller. But you wrote a book that actually is asking people to invest some work in connecting across differences, and people don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, Simon, it was the lowest point of my career. So it's hard for me to get spun up to write another book.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I think hopefully we can spread some of the love and the joy that I can hear.
Yeah, and I will say, in spite of that, we've sold 170,000 copies of the book. So, it's not like 5,000. And it's been translated into 15 languages. So, in the book world, it's considered a success. In the Carole Robin world, it's not.
But that's what makes you who you are is the drive, and that's part of the energy that you're passing on to other people, not just teaching the concepts, but encouraging them to go and test, and then opening up your heart with a nonprofit to bring more people in to the system to spread through experience, right? And I think the old as I know, I think I was listening to, there was a recording interview, and I'm terrible at golf. I know nothing about golf. Everyone that I work with does, but there was a famous player, and he just won an award, and I think it was like the third tournament that he'd won in a row, and he'd broken some records. And people were asking, "What does it feel like?" And he said, "Well, it was amazing, but as soon as I got off the field, all I could think about was
the next round."
Right, and he was depressed by that. But the irony is, I look at him outside in, and I try and take that on for myself and say, looking at him is that drive and that that desire for fulfillment and chasing happiness is kind of what made him a world-class golfer in the first place. If he'd just gone out and the first time, he'd be like, yeah, well, I played okay, it wasn't really that great, never would have achieved anything. So it's important sometimes to take a step back and reflect on that. But I can tell that outside of the people who have read the book or been part of your course, they're also then telling people in their circle and their network, and that is spreading the almost the understanding around your techniques much further than you'll ever be able to capture.
I think you're right, and I get random lovely emails from people on people who want to connect with me on LinkedIn who say, I just read your book, it saved my marriage, it changed my life. Thank you for writing a book. Random people, and because the book is not an academic, I think you've read it. It's not. Mm-hmm. It's the concepts are learned through the stories of various relationships and how they evolve. And at the end of every chapter, there's suggestions on how to put what you just learned to use. So it's almost like a little workbook at the end of each chapter. And so we wanted to write a really pragmatic book. We did not want to write an academic.
But I think it balances though, because, generally the approaches and the concepts in there are things that people, may already know, or they know that it makes sense. But you've got to read something, or you've got to have a conversation, or you've got to see it work for yourself in order to believe it. And as soon as you get that little spark of, I disclose something, and and if I can
And
tell
something
my book
happens.
is
Yes.
strong, then you're like, wait, there's something here. And I
Yep.
think hearing it while you're reading it, you're not reading the text. The text is reading you, right? So it's you're learning through absorbing the words. And I think, that's why books will be around forever, is because
Yeah.
people do truly
That's
realize that,
that's
that's not
lovely.
truth.
Yeah.
Um,
The other thing I'll say is sometimes you'll read, people will read what we've written and say, yes, of course, that's obvious, or that's simple. And so I used to say, come on, to my audience, come on, this isn't rocket science. Until I did a lengthy workshop for a bunch of the top engineers at NASA. And of course, I said to them, come on, you guys, mostly guys, this is not rocket science. And one of them said, oh, Carole, this is so much harder than rocket science. So then I stopped saying that.
There you go. Maybe that's the title to your next book then. It's not rocket
It's not rocket science. Yeah. I like it.
Well, I just, on a personal level, really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. I'm really flattered to be asked.
Yeah, I think the content in your book is is extremely important. And like you said, it's a time of humanity's evolution. And even with the introduction of AI, which, I know a lot of your cohort alums are probably helping accelerate, where this, this collective consciousness and this approach to people being more human and getting in touch with their human side is critical.
More than ever. Yeah. And by the way, there's a Carole Robin AI.
That'll be so fantastic.
It's not as though I don't think there's a place in the world for AI. CaroleRobin.ai. And I think I agree with you that it's more important than ever to pay attention to the human aspects, the stuff AIs aren't going to be able to do. I don't know how AIs are going to help human beings connect. Yeah. Maybe not yet.
Yeah. And it is I think understanding that, appreciating it, and maybe being proactive about it. I'm definitely doing that myself, right? Like I'm on a self individuation journey. It's letting me learn about, what I like and what I don't like and who I really am, and using that in ways to connect better with executives I work with, or, team members. I've seen the improvements, right, in just my general level of fulfillment and happiness, and ways to get more stuff done. And that is in parallel to using a lot of these tools that help with more tactical activities. These don't have to be at polar opposites. If anything, they're happening at the same time. And I think, can't put my finger on it, but I think there's a reason for it. And I'm sure that your book and your teachings will go a long way to helping with that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hope we keep in contact, and really appreciate your time.
I'd be delighted to. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share some of my thinking, and hopefully people will find this of value.
Yeah. And if anyone connects with this, go out and get Carole's book, Connect. You won't regret it. So yeah.
You can also find me on LinkedIn. Carole Robin.
Okay. Of course. Yeah.
Carole Robin, PhD.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you, Carole.